So the chord progression you use over a particular melody line can significantly alter the feel and sound of a song. It can also influence the genre of music that that particular song falls into. For example, pop songs tend to use triads that are largely diatonic or in a single key, and the melody tends to target the root of each chord. A good example of this is All My Loving by the Beatles. You can see the melody and the chords I just played up here in the picture-in-picture. And you'll notice that all of the chords, except for the last one, are triads. They're all in the key of C major, except for that B flat chord. And most of the chords just target the root note of the melody note that happens to fall on beat 1 of each bar, which is, of course, when the chord changes. Although we do see the third getting targeted towards the end of the song there. So that's very commonly seen in pop songs, right? The use of triads, root note targeting, and diatonic chord progressions. So now if we wanted to change this chord progression to turn it into a tonal jazz song, then we would have to use tricks or ideas that are very common in tonal jazz songs. And these are the use of seventh chords, the use of 2/5s or 2/5-1s, and targeting guide tones or available tensions, that is, the third or the seventh of the chord, or the 9, 11, or 13 of the chord. Keeping the same melody but changing the chords to adhere to these few rules or ideas will change the song into a tonal jazz version of All My Loving. So for example, we could do the following. Cool, so you see there we used seventh chords, we used a 2/5, 2/5, 2/5-1 chord progression, and we picked chords such that the melody is now largely targeting thirds and sevenths, with that nice ninth at the very end there, where we played a D over a C major 7 chord. And you'll notice that even though this melody is all in the key of C major, because it just uses the white notes, we've actually forced a modulation over this melody by using chords from different keys. We started with a 2/5 in D, then a 2/5 in G, then a 2/5-1 in C. So over this melody, which by itself looks like it's just in the key of C major, we've kind of shunted in these new keys based on the chords that we used. And they, of course, work because the melody doesn't play any of the black notes that are found in those keys. Next, we could reharmonize this song in a modal jazz style. Now, this would require us to again use seventh chords, and again, mostly target the thirds, sevenths, or available tensions of the chords, to keep our chord progression diatonic or all in a single key, and to mostly move our chords by step, a stepwise harmonic movement. So instead of using 2/5-1s, we're going to use 1-2-3s, for example. So doing this, you could create the following. So again, looking at the chords I actually played, we're in the key of C major, and the chord progression I played was essentially a 3-2-1-2-3-2-1. And you see that we're targeting, thirds, sevenths, 11ths, ninths again. Right, so that's still quite jazzy, but it's a very different feel. It's now modal rather than tonal. We're no longer using 2/5s and 2/5-1s that are eventually sort of leading us back to an ultimate tonic chord that sounds resolved. Instead, we're now moving by step, which gives the whole song a bit more of a floaty, unresolved feeling, because we're not really establishing a tonic chord by playing a perfect cadence, essentially. Instead, we're just moving up and down and back again, and it doesn't really feel like we're heading towards some kind of ultimate tonic chord like we were in the tonal jazz version. Now next we could reharmonize this again in the style of atonal jazz. Now here, of course, you could just mash the keyboard at random and not really create chords at all and have it be really, really dissonant. But let's not do that. Let's still use chords and let's still have our chords line up or adhere to the melody. But now they're going to be quasi-random chords. They're not going to be from any particular key. They're not going to follow any sort of common chord progression like a 2-5-1. They're just going to be largely random chords that happen to fit the melody because they target, again, a third, seventh, or available tension of that chord. Cool, so doing this, we could get something as follows. Right, so that sounded quite unnerving and weird and a little bit random, but it still kind of worked. It didn't sound that terrible. So we're still picking chords that fit the melody by having it target, thirds, sevenths, and available tensions, but the chords aren't from any one key. They're not forming any kind of logical or coherent chord progression. They're, again, quasi-random. And I say quasi-random only because they do actually still fit the melody. So even though each of the chords we're picking fits the melody and relates back to the melody, the chords themselves are standalone. They don't relate to each other in any meaningful way. Now we could take this further and reharmonize this song as a blues song. Now to do this, we use exclusively dominant 7 chords. We use only the 1, 4, and 5 chords of the key that we're going to choose. And we want the melody to target the flat 3, flat 5, or flat 7 of the key that we're in. That is, the blue notes in the blues scale. So reharmonizing this melody into a 8-bar blues in G would sound as follows. Now, that sounds okay, but it doesn't really sound bluesy, does it? And that's because the melody isn't really playing those blue notes in the key of G. It's kind of targeting the 5th or the root of each of the chords that I'm playing. So it's fine, it kind of fits harmonically, but it doesn't sound bluesy because we're not playing blue notes. So if we wanted to, we could of course change the melody a little bit to chuck in some of those blue notes. Cool, still not super bluesy, but I chucked a flat 3 and a flat 5 in there, so it does sound a little bit bluesier than before. But still not great, so you wouldn't usually reharmonize this kind of melody into a blues song. Now you notice there, I wasn't just playing the pure dominant chords in the left hand. I was kind of using a bluesy pattern or technique or bass line. And so that's another good way to kind of reharmonize or change the feel and sound of a particular song, without necessarily needing to actually technically reharmonize or change the chords. For example, we could use the original pop chords, but just rather than playing the chords, insert a walking bass line. Right, so same chords as the pop song, but just using a walking bass line as a technique over those chords. Similarly, we could use a bossa nova bass line over the chords. Or we could use the locked hands technique, which is actually both a technique and a reharmonization. Now, I'm not going to go into the intricacies or the rules and concepts behind the locked hands technique. You'll see what I'm doing in a second, but essentially the idea is that we're reharmonizing every single melody note with a chord. Cool, and that's it for this lesson. Thanks for watching. So hopefully this demonstrated that if you're given a particular melody line, you can actually reharmonize it into lots of different genres or styles of music, depending on the chords you choose. Thanks guys, see ya.